I stood outside the glass ballroom doors, watching strangers toast my son without me. A security guard blocked me, stone-faced. "Sorry, ma'am," the groom said, "no exceptions." Someone inside gasped, "Isn't that his mother?" My heels sank into the gravel as laughter echoed through the walls. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, but I had already signed the papers tucked inside my purse. The next morning, his new wife called me, shaking, desperate. "Please, undo it. You've ruined everything." Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. I wasn't always the woman standing outside her son's wedding. Once, I was his whole world. My name is Margaret. I've lived in the same brick house on Maple Street for over 30 years. The front porch creaks in winter, and the hydrangeas bloom like they still expect him to come running down the steps with scraped knees and impossible questions. I was 33 when my husband, David, died in a crash on the I-85. One moment I was sipping coffee, folding Daniel's soccer uniform. The next, I was a widow with a 12-year-old boy who had just lost the only man he'd ever looked up to. Grief hollowed me, but Daniel was the light that wouldn't go out. He held my hand at the funeral with a grip too tight for a child. Remember how his voice broke when he whispered, "I'll never leave you alone, Mom." That promise kept me alive. I worked 2 jobs, library clerk by day, catering assistant by night. Every dollar I earned had a name on it: Daniel's piano lessons, Daniel's braces, Daniel's college fund. I didn't buy a new coat for 7 winters, but he never missed a school trip. We were a team. It was always Mom and Daniel, a little fortress of inside jokes, pasta nights, and early morning study sessions. Then came Leah. She walked into our lives like a sunbeam, smart, soft-spoken, with eyes that made my son forget every other woman he'd dated. I liked her instantly. She was respectful, always offering to help wash dishes or carry groceries. And the way she looked at Daniel, it reminded me of the way I used to look at David. I opened my heart to her. The first Christmas she spent with us, I gave her a necklace that belonged to my mother. She hugged me like I was already family. We had movie nights, wine on the porch, long talks while Daniel was out. I told her things I hadn't said out loud in years, about raising a boy alone, about missing the version of myself that once laughed. More freely, she called me her second mom. When Daniel got accepted to medical school, we celebrated together. When he graduated, I was the one who ironed his gown and slipped a note into his sleeve that read, "Dad would be proud." Through every milestone, I stood beside him. I didn't raise a perfect son, but I raised a good one. Or so I thought. Wasn't blind. I saw how the world was changing, how young people pull away to form lives of their own. I expected some distance. But I never expected to be erased. Leah and Daniel moved in together a few years after college. I helped them with the down payment, $25,000 I'd saved for emergencies. I didn't hesitate. I never expected it back. That's what mothers do, right? For a while things stayed warm. She still called, still brought me baked bread and stories from their weekend hikes. I convinced myself everything was fine. But subtle shifts began to take shape. It started with the invitations. I'd hear about brunches after they happened. She began speaking for both of them. "Daniel's really busy. We can't make it. We're trying something new for holidays this year." At first I thought I was imagining it, that maybe I was being sensitive. Then came the phone call. Daniel's voice casual. "Leah and I are planning something small for the wedding, just close friends." I laughed. "Daniel, I'm your mother." Silence. Then, "Yeah, it's complicated." Complicated. That was the word that opened the door to everything that followed. I should have pushed harder, demanded clarity. But I didn't want to be that mother, the clingy, overbearing cliché. So I stayed quiet. I told myself they'd come around, but every silence after that wasn't empty. It was full of decisions made without me. One afternoon, I sat on the porch with the box in my lap, the one that held David's wedding watch. I'd always intended to give it to Daniel when he got engaged, a piece of his father to carry into his own marriage. I called Leah and told her about it. I said, "It should be a surprise. Give it to him before the wedding." She was quiet, then said, "That's sweet." She never mentioned it again. Months passed. No invitation arrived, no mention of venues, dates, fittings, only filtered Instagram stories and whispers from neighbors. The week before the wedding, a friend from church said she'd seen Leah at a dress fitting. I smiled through it, went home, and checked the mail again. Empty. I sat at the kitchen table that night and stared at my phone for hours. I wanted to call him, demand answers, remind him of the nights he cried in my lap, the meals I skipped so he could eat, the promise he made. Instead, I opened the fridge, poured a glass of wine, and turned out the lights, because deep down I knew I hadn't just been left out. I had been removed, intentionally. And if a son can forget the hands that held him, what else might he forget when the vows are spoken and the doors are closed? You don't lose your child all at once. It happens in slow, silent inches, the kind you only measure once it's too late. Looking back, the change didn't start with the wedding. It started about a year before that, in the subtleties. The texts that went unanswered, the way Daniel started calling less often, how Leah's voice would tighten when I offered to help with anything. At first, I chalked it up to growing pains. After all, he was settling into a demanding job, and Leah had just launched her own boutique consulting firm. Two ambitious young people in love, building a life. I told myself not to interfere, but mothers know. We feel the shift long before the ground caves in. I remember the Sunday they arrived late for dinner, Daniel looking tired, Leah unusually quiet. I'd made all his childhood favorites, roast chicken, garlic potatoes, lemon cake from scratch. As I plated the food, I overheard Leah mutter something under her breath. "She still cooks like this is 1995. I smiled and said nothing, but the words sat in my chest like cold lead. That night, as they were leaving, I handed Daniel a small photo album I'd put together for his birthday. It had pictures of him and David, snapshots from our road trips, birthday parties where he was missing his two front teeth. He held it like it was a casserole dish, grateful but unsure what to do with it. Leah didn't even look inside. Later, I found the album left on my entryway bench. Weeks passed. Then months. I noticed Daniel stopped calling me Mom and started saying Margaret when Leah was around. That was the real beginning of the end. She began making the decisions. I was no longer consulted, just informed, if I was told at all. Daniel once asked if I could transfer the title of my old car to Leah since her lease was up. I agreed, even paid the transfer fees. She never said thank you. A few months later, I saw it listed online. She'd sold it for more than it was worth. It wasn't just the small slights, it was the pattern. Every kindness I offered, she twisted into a weakness. Every boundary I tried to hold, she painted as a threat. But Daniel couldn't, or wouldn't, see it. And one afternoon, I gently asked him if he was truly happy. He said, "Don't start." When I pressed further, he exploded. "Why can't you just let me live my life?" That was the first time I saw a look in his eyes I didn't recognize. Not anger, not frustration, indifference. The boy who once held my hand during thunderstorms now stood before me like I was just another woman standing in his way. I remember how quiet the house felt after he left. I stood in the doorway long after he pulled away. It hit me then. This house had been built around Daniel. Every room held him. Every corner knew his name. And now, it all felt like a museum of someone who wasn't coming back. Then came the reveal that sealed it. I was out for coffee with Marianne, a friend from church, when she casually mentioned she'd received a beautiful save-the-date for Daniel's wedding. "They're getting married at the Greystone," she said, sipping her cappuccino. "Can you believe it?" I blinked, pretending not to be stunned. "Yes," I lied. "It'll be lovely." I excused myself to the bathroom and sat, in the stall, shaking. Not from rage, but from something worse. Finality. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had rewritten the script and cut my name from the credits. Still, I waited. Checked the mailbox every morning like an addict waiting for a fix. Told myself the invitation must have gotten lost. Told myself Daniel would call, explain, laugh it off. Nothing came, not even a text. Then, one night, my neighbor Carla, whose daughter works at the Greystone, knocked on my door. "Maggie," she said gently, "I thought you'd want to know. They finalized the guest list. I asked about you." Leah said, and I quote, "It's not that kind of relationship anymore. Not that kind of relationship, as if I were an ex-girlfriend, or worse, a liability." I went upstairs, closed the blinds, sat in the dark. I didn't cry. I hadn't cried since the day David died. Instead, I walked to the closet and took down the safe box. Inside were every birth certificate, insurance form, and legal document I'd ever saved. There was one in particular I hadn't touched in years, a revocable trust account in Daniel's name. It had been created shortly after David passed. I wanted to ensure that no matter what happened to me, Daniel would have a foundation, a start. A gift from the mother who gave him everything. But something in me shifted that night. Love shouldn't cost you your dignity, and I was done begging to be loved by the child I raised. The next time I saw my son, he was standing under a floral arch, smiling, and I was outside the glass, watching it all, uninvited, unacknowledged, and unbroken. The thing about being cut out of your own child's life is, it doesn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happens like a slow drip, a leak behind the walls. You only realize how much damage has been done once the ceiling caves in. A few days after I heard about the venue, I decided to confront things directly. I picked up the phone, dialed Daniel, and asked as calmly as I could, "Is there something you need to tell me about the wedding?" Silence. Then a sigh. Leah and I talked. We thought it might be best if we kept the guest list tight. You know, stress, family politics. I interrupted. "Daniel, am I invited?" He paused again. "It's not personal. Those three?" Words cut deeper than any insult ever could. I tried to reason with him. "I don't need to be front row. I don't need to make a toast. I just want to see you start your life, that's all." But he'd already withdrawn into that new version of himself, the one I didn't know how to reach. "Leah's family paid for most of it," he said flatly. "They wanted something small." Small? The Greystone held 300. I didn't yell. I didn't plead. I simply said, "I understand," and hung up. It wasn't understanding. It was resignation. Days passed. The wedding came closer. Then Leah called me. Not to apologize, not to invite me, but to make sure I knew where the boundaries were. "I just want to avoid any awkwardness," she said, her voice sugar-coated. "Daniel's under a lot of pressure. I think it's better if we keep things simple." "Simple," I repeated. "As in, pretending his mother doesn't exist?" She laughed lightly. "Let's not be dramatic, Margaret. It's not like, we don't appreciate what you've done." She used the past tense deliberately. Then came the final blow, one I hadn't expected. A week before the wedding, I ran into Daniel's childhood best friend Marcus at the grocery store. He was surprised to see me. "Aren't you heading to the rehearsal dinner?" he asked casually. "They said it's a family-only event." I nodded, holding back tears. "Family only," I repeated. I drove home in silence, parked in the garage, and sat with the engine running for 20 minutes. The house felt colder that night, not because of the weather, but because for the first time I realized I wasn't just being excluded, I was being erased. The next morning, I opened my closet and took out a dress I hadn't worn in years, the same pale blue gown I'd worn to Daniel's high school graduation. Back then, he had hugged me so tightly in it, he wrinkled the fabric. Now, I steamed it carefully, as if trying to smooth away the memories. I did my hair, put on lipstick. I wasn't going to make a scene. I just needed to see him. To remind myself that he still existed, still breathed, still smiled, even if it wasn't for me anymore. The Greystone sat on a hill overlooking the lake. I parked discreetly and walked toward the entrance just as the string quartet began playing. Through the glass, I could see it all, the cascading flowers, the rows of gold chairs, the laughter. Daniel stood at the altar, looking handsome and heartbreakingly grown. Then I saw Leah walking down the aisle, arm in arm with her father. I waited for Daniel's eyes to scan the crowd, to look for me, to hesitate. He didn't. His smile was wide, certain, and that's when it hit me. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't oversight. This was intentional. He hadn't forgotten me. He had chosen not to remember. I stayed only a few minutes, standing behind the hedges like a ghost in chiffon. Then I turned around, walked back to my car, and drove home, each mile dissolving another piece of the woman who once believed unconditional love was enough. That night I sat at my desk and pulled out the trust documents. They were straightforward, David, and I had set it up to mature on Daniel's wedding day. It was supposed to be a gift of legacy, a foundation of love, but love without respect is just obligation wearing a pretty dress. I contacted my lawyer and revoked the terms. Legally, I was within my rights. The trust was revocable, conditional. I had just never imagined I'd need to act on it. The irony was bitter. While I stood outside that ballroom, humiliated, Daniel stood inside believing he was stepping into a life built on everything I'd given. Except now, the foundation was gone, and I didn't feel guilty. Because sometimes love is not about giving, it's about withholding what they were never entitled to in the first place. While they danced under chandeliers I helped pay for, I signed away their future, one stroke of a pen at a time. After the wedding, I didn't answer the phone for 3 days. Not when it rang, not when it buzzed, not even when it vibrated so hard. It fell off the nightstand. I already knew who was calling, and I already knew why. But before I could respond to her desperation, I had to sit with mine, and it came in waves. I kept seeing Daniel in that ballroom, how relaxed he looked, how complete, as if his life had always started without me. I went into his childhood room for the first time in months. The posters still curled slightly at the corners. His old desk sat in the corner with the nick he made, dragging his backpack across it year after year. That room was my shrine. It held flashbacks like ghosts. I sat on the bed and let them wash over me. I remembered a summer afternoon when he was 10. He had come home bruised and filthy after being shoved off his bike by older boys. I ran a bath, knelt beside the tub, and let him cry into my shoulder until the water turned cold. He'd looked up at me and whispered, "You're my safe place." Where had that boy gone? Another flash, the night before his college interview. He was terrified. "What if I mess it all up, Mom?" "You won't," I told him, smoothing his collar, "because you've already made me proud." He left the next morning with toast in one hand and my good luck note in the other. And Leah. I remembered the night she called me crying, unsure about whether she was enough for Daniel. I stayed on the phone for 2 hours, telling her she was already family. "You're not just enough," I said. "You're everything to him, which means you're everything to me." But maybe that was my mistake. Maybe I gave too freely, too quickly. Maybe I blurred the line between love and entitlement. The next memory was harder to sit with. A few years back, after my gallbladder surgery, Leah stopped by the hospital. She brought flowers, stayed 15 minutes, and left early because of a client call. Daniel came the next day, but he seemed rushed, distracted. I remember him glancing at his phone more than at me. That was the first time I felt something foreign pass between us. Obligation. The warmth had already begun to cool, but I kept pretending. Because mothers pretend, don't they? We lie to ourselves, in service of their happiness. And yet, when the silence after the wedding finally broke, it wasn't Daniel's voice that I heard. It was hers. I was in the kitchen steeping tea when my phone rang. I didn't answer at first. But on the third call, I picked up. Leah's voice was frantic, like a violin string stretched too tight. "Margaret, please, I need to talk to you. Please don't hang up." I didn't say anything. I just waited. "It's about the trust," she said quickly. "Daniel doesn't know. He still thinks he's getting it. Still thinks. That told me everything. She'd known. Probably for months. She had planned their future with money she didn't earn and warmth she didn't intend to return. "I don't think you understand," she went on. "We're making an offer on a house. The down payment was supposed to come from me?" I said, voice flat. She hesitated. "From the trust, from what David left for him." "No," I corrected gently. "From what I protected for him, what I preserved while working 2 jobs, what I saved instead of spending, what I sacrificed for." Silence. Then she broke. The composure crumbled. "Please, Margaret," she sobbed. "I didn't mean to push you out. I thought if I let you in too much, I'd lose him. You're his past. I'm his future." That line. I could have screamed, but I didn't. Instead, I said quietly, "If you were secure in your place, you wouldn't have needed to erase mine." She was sobbing now. "He's going to hate me. Please don't tell him." I took a long breath, let the kettle whistle behind me. "I didn't do this to hurt you," I said, "but I won't undo it to protect you either." Then I hung up, stood by the window for a long time after that, watching the trees sway, feeling for the first time in months something that wasn't grief. It was clarity, sharp, cold, necessary. Have you ever had someone rewrite your role in their life, like you were just a footnote in a story you helped build? Share your experience in the comments. You're not alone. She thought I'd made a mistake. What she didn't realize was I had finally made a choice. I didn't hear from Daniel for another 4 days. It was eerie how calm everything felt. As if life had exhaled, as if the storm had already passed. But I knew better. When the call finally came, it wasn't fury or confusion in his voice. It was detachment. "Mom," he said flatly, "did you cancel the trust?" I was sitting on the back porch, the wind brushing against the wind chimes David hung 20 years ago. I let the silence stretch before answering. Yes. A pause. Then, "Why?" I considered giving him a rehearsed explanation. A tidy justification about timing, legality, conditions. But none of that was the truth. So I told him the truth, because I needed to reclaim what little self-respect I still had. He said nothing, just the quiet sound of his breathing on the other end. Then, "You waited until after the wedding to tell me?" "No, Daniel," I said. "I waited until after you showed me who you are." He didn't hang up, but he didn't respond either. "Did Leah tell you why she called me?" I asked gently. "I know she was upset," he said. "She said you were threatening her." I laughed once, not bitterly, just softly, tiredly. "I didn't threaten her," I said. "I finally told her no, there's a difference. Still, no apology, no acknowledgement, just that wall again, the one he built. With bricks I handed him in love. But something cracked before he ended the call. "Was it ever really for me?" he asked quietly. "The trust. Or was it always just another way to control things? That cut deeper than anything else had, because he didn't see it. Not yet. He didn't see how many birthdays I'd worked through, how many times I'd skipped, meals to stretch $1 further, how many nights I'd held his hand when the world felt too heavy, and how I'd saved and planned, not out of control, but out of care. But still, I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself. Maybe you'll understand someday, I said, when you're the one being forgotten. He ended the call. I sat outside until the sun went down. I wasn't sure if I'd ever hear from him again. But that's the strange thing about resolution. It doesn't come wrapped in apologies or cinematic moments. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet shift inside you. A door you didn't realize you'd kept open finally swinging shut. I slept well that night, for the first time in weeks. The next morning, I went into the garden, dug my hands into the dirt, cut back the dead parts of the rosebush near the gate. There was peace in the pruning. That's what grief is sometimes, cutting away the overgrown things to let something else grow in its place. That afternoon, I received a text from Daniel. She told me everything. I need time. That was it. Not love, not sorry. Just time. And somehow, that was enough for now. Because it meant the cracks were forming. The light was leaking in. Later that week, I ran into Marianne at the grocery store again. She put a hand on my shoulder and said, "I heard about what happened. You held your dignity like a crown, Maggie. That boy of yours will come around." I nodded, but said nothing, because I wasn't waiting anymore. That's the part people don't talk about. The moment you stop waiting for someone to return the love you gave so freely, and instead, you begin giving it to yourself. I baked that night, a peach cobbler, Daniel's favorite, not because I expected him to come, but because I wanted it. Because the kitchen didn't have to be a shrine to absence. It could still be a place of presence. Mine. 2 days later, Leah showed up at my front door. Not crying, not screaming, but different. Worn. "I'm not here to fight," she said. "I just wanted you to know. Daniel's gone to stay with a friend." I let her speak, not because she deserved it, but because I needed to hear what she'd do with the silence. "I made mistakes," she said. "I thought if I could be everything to him, I wouldn't have to compete with his past." She looked around the house like it was a relic. "I never realized. This wasn't your past. It's your presence. You never stopped being here." "No," I said gently. "I didn't." She didn't ask for the trust to be reinstated. She didn't beg this time. She just said, "I don't think I deserve him, and I don't think I deserve you either." I closed the door after she left. Slowly. Softly. Because something inside me had already closed, too. For the first time in a long time, I didn't ache for his voice. I just listened to my own, and it was finally enough. The unraveling didn't happen with fireworks. It began with Daniel going quiet. Not cold, just quiet. He stopped defending her. A week after Leah showed up at my door, Daniel sent another text. "I need to ask you something." "Can we talk?" I agreed. No gloating, no dramatics. I didn't need to be right. I just needed to be ready. He came over on a Sunday afternoon, the same time he used to come for dinners before Leah slowly pried that tradition from our hands. He looked thinner, tired, the kind of tired that doesn't come from work, but from trying to make something broken appear whole. We sat in the living room, each with a cup of coffee between us like a fragile truce. He didn't start with sorry. He didn't even start with hi. He asked, "How long have you known?" I looked at him, steady. Long enough to realize what I was losing. He set down his mug with a slight tremble. "I didn't want to believe it. I thought you just didn't like her, that it was jealousy or control or motherhood," I offered. He winced. I could see it. the push and pull behind his eyes, the loyalty that had slowly transferred from me to her over years of manipulation, reframing, and quiet gaslighting. Then, as if something inside him finally snapped, he reached into his coat and pulled out a manila folder. "She was borrowing against my name," he said. "Credit cards, business lines. I didn't even know until I got a call from the bank about a missed payment on a card I never opened." I opened the folder. Statements, authorizations, transfers, all signed, all traced, all her. He ran a hand through his hair. I confronted her. She cried, said it was temporary, that she did it for us. I didn't say, "I told you so." I didn't need to. Instead, I asked, "What did you say?" He looked down. I didn't say anything. I just left. There. It was the first flicker of the boy I raised. The one who couldn't sleep if he thought someone he loved was hurting. Except now, he finally realized who was hurting him. I didn't reach out. I didn't touch his hand. I just let the silence settle. Then he asked, so softly I almost didn't hear, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I smiled sadly. "Because no one can teach a grown man what he doesn't want to learn. You had to see it for yourself." He nodded, eyes glistening, but not breaking. Not yet. Later that evening, after he left, I found myself standing in front of the safe again. My fingers hovered over the lock. But I didn't open it. Not yet. Because this time, it wasn't about taking something back. It was about watching what he'd do with what he now knew. 3 days later, I got a call from a woman named Francine, private investigator, referred by Daniel's lawyer. "Ma'am," she said, "we found something." Leah had been in contact with an old boyfriend, a man from her college years. Frequent messaging, private meetups logged in her calendar, financial transfers that didn't quite add up. It wasn't just emotional manipulation anymore. It was fraud, possibly infidelity. The image Daniel had worked so hard to preserve was starting to fray. And not just around the edges. Still, I didn't insert myself. I stayed quiet. I gardened. I read. I baked. He needed to come to me when he was ready. And he did. Another Sunday. He knocked instead of walking in. This time, his shoulders sagged. His face was pale. "She won't contest it," he said. "She doesn't want it to go to court." "The annulment?" I asked. He nodded. "She signed everything this morning." We sat in silence again, but this time it wasn't awkward. It was sacred. "I feel like I don't even know who I married," he whispered, "like I've been asleep." I looked at him carefully. "And now?" "I'm awake," he said. There were no grand gestures. No piano playing in the background, just the two of us, mother and son, quietly facing what remained. After a while, he asked, "Do you hate me?" I didn't answer right away. I wanted him to sit in that discomfort for a moment. Then I said, "No, I don't hate you, but I mourned you." He looked away. Shame, regret, all the things a man carries when he realizes he's wounded the person who loved him most. I stood up and placed his old photo album, the one he left behind years ago, on the table. "I kept it," I said. "Even when you didn't want it, even when you forgot what it meant." He opened it with trembling hands, page after page of his childhood, his milestones, his messy triumphs and tender falls. "I forgot who I was," he whispered. "No," I said, softly. "You just forgot who you came from." He came back to the house to remember, but he stayed to rebuild. And for the first time in years, I believed it might actually be possible. The days after Daniel filed for annulment moved slowly, like a fog lifting in layers. He stayed with a friend for a while, Marcus, the same childhood friend who'd accidentally revealed the wedding guest list to me. Marcus was kind. He never said, "I told you so," Not to me, and, as far as I could tell, not to Daniel either. That was what Daniel needed most. Quiet truth, not judgment. Meanwhile, Leah vanished. No calls, no texts, no tears on my doorstep, her signature on day. The annulment papers was the last trace of her in our lives, and yet her absence still echoed. One afternoon I found Daniel standing in my garden. Not doing anything, just standing there, staring at the rose bushes I'd pruned after the wedding. Funny, he said. She hated these, said they were too old-fashioned. She wasn't wrong, I said, stepping beside him. They're high maintenance, and they bleed when you trim them. We stood in silence. Then he turned to me and asked, "Is there any version of this where you forgive me?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I said, "Come inside. I made lunch." He followed me into the kitchen. I served him the simplest meal, grilled cheese and tomato soup, the way I used to when he was sick as a boy. We ate quietly. He didn't push the question again. But I saw it sitting there between bites. Finally, I looked up. Forgiveness isn't a door, Daniel. It's a hallway. Some days I walk a little further down it. Some days I turn back. His eyes reddened. I don't know how to make this right. Good, I said, because it's not about making it right. It's about becoming someone who doesn't make it wrong again. After lunch, he asked to see the trust documents. I'm not here to ask for the money, he added quickly. I want to understand what it meant to you, why you protected it all these years. I took him into the study, opened the safe, handed him the thick manila folder. He sat in the old leather chair David used to love, reading every page like it was scripture. I had no idea, he murmured. This would have changed everything for us. College, med school, the house, and... Yet, I said gently, I never used it as leverage. I only kept it as protection, for you, even from yourself. He looked up. And when did you decide I needed protecting from me? The day you stood behind a velvet rope and let strangers treat me like I didn't exist. He winced. I didn't think she'd actually ban me, I finished. Erase me? Let the security guards humiliate me while you smiled for photos? He lowered his head. I thought you wouldn't come. I thought you'd get the message and stay away. But I did come, I said. Because even after everything, part of me still hoped my son would see me. The weight of it landed like stone in the room. Daniel stood. He walked to the window, stared out like he was searching for the version of himself that might have handled things differently. I wish I could go back, he whispered. Do it all again. Invite you, walk you down the aisle, introduce you as the woman who raised me, who saved me. Tears welled in his eyes, not loud sobs, not dramatics, just quiet regret breaking the surface after too long underwater. I handed him a tissue. I don't need a second wedding, Daniel. I just need the man I raised to show up now. And he did. That night, he stayed for dinner, helped me wash the dishes. We didn't talk about Leah. We didn't talk about the trust. We just talked about his residency, about my neighbor's ridiculous lawn gnome collection, about the time he accidentally dyed our dog pink with Easter egg dye. It felt real again. 2 weeks later, I met with my lawyer. I didn't reinstate the trust, but I updated the terms, made it conditional, flexible, and tied to things that mattered: honesty, stability, clarity. I wasn't punishing him. I was setting a new foundation. That same day, I left an envelope on his kitchen counter. Inside was a letter, handwritten, firm, and loving. The money was never the gift. You were. Be someone who honors that. He had lost his marriage, but he was starting to rebuild something far more fragile: the truth. And this time, I was going to let him earn it. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Daniel came back for the photo albums. He stood in my doorway holding an empty cardboard box, sheepish, eyes down like a boy who knew he'd already been forgiven more than once. "I thought it was time I stopped remembering my life through someone else's lens," he said. I nodded, stepped aside, and let him in. We sat on the living room floor for hours. He flipped through his childhood like an archaeologist, each page a new layer of forgotten warmth. Halloween costumes, report cards with crooked stickers, Daniel asleep on David's chest in the recliner. "Was I always this loved?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said, "even when you forgot." The annulment was finalized 2 weeks later. No drama, no press, just a quiet disassembling of something that never should have been built in the first place. Leah disappeared like a ghost who finally realized she wasn't welcome. Daniel never said her name again. Instead, he started saying mine, not Margaret, not Ma, just Mom, like it was soft again, like it belonged. He came for dinners once a week now, always on Sundays, brought dessert sometimes. Sometimes flowers, sometimes nothing but silence, and that was okay. We were learning to be in the same room without walking on broken glass. It was slow work, humble, honest. The trust? I didn't hand it over, not all at once. I let him see it, understand it, and most importantly, respect it. I revised the terms to reflect something more meaningful than money. If Daniel wanted access, he'd need to do 3 things: submit a financial plan, attend 1 family counseling session, with me, write a letter to David, not for us, for himself. He didn't complain. He did all 3. The day I gave him the first, disbursement, he didn't thank me. He hugged me, tighter than he had since he was a boy, long enough for me to feel the apology he couldn't quite put into words. Later that night, I found the letter he'd written to his father. He left it on the kitchen counter, unsigned, but it was enough. "Dad," I broke her, "the woman you left behind. I thought I was protecting my future, but I was selling the past for someone else's comfort. I thought love was loyalty, but now I see it's something quieter. Truth. She loved me louder than I could hear. I'm listening now. I hope you're proud, not of who I was, but of who I'm trying to become." I folded the letter and placed it inside David's old watch box. A symbol. A circle completed. Daniel's friend Marcus came by once with him for dinner. He joked, "I've never seen a man win his mother back like that." Daniel didn't laugh. He just said, "I didn't win her back. She let me return." And that's what forgiveness is, really. Not a prize, a permission. The money? It helped him restart, pay off some debts, invest in a small clinic project he'd been dreaming about for years. But it was never the money that mattered. It was the reckoning, the reclaiming, the quiet rebuilding of something nearly lost. Now, when Daniel visits, he sits in the same seat David used to sit in, reading the paper, sipping tea instead of coffee, watching the sunset like it's an old friend. The house feels full again. Not of noise or clutter, but of peace. And peace, I've learned, is the final form of love. Not passion, not praise, just presence. He still makes mistakes. I do too. We speak honestly, sometimes awkwardly. But we speak. And we stay. The past is no longer a wound between us. It's a bridge. If someone you loved betrayed you like this, would you offer them a second chance? Or protect your peace and move on? I want to know. Share your thoughts below. In the end, I didn't rebuild a relationship. I unearthed the foundation that had never truly broken, and this time we laid the bricks together. I've come to believe that motherhood is not a story of perfect devotion. It's a silent endurance of being, forgotten and remembered over and over again. You give, and then one day you look up and realize no one remembers the hands that packed the lunches. No one thanks the mouth that stayed quiet so others could speak. But maybe that's the point. Maybe motherhood is not meant to be rewarded. It's meant to be remembered. Eventually. When Daniel closed that ballroom door in my face, I thought the chapter had ended. but all it did was force me to write my own. In the beginning, I thought love meant sacrifice. But sacrifice without boundaries becomes self-erasure, and I will never erase myself again, not even for the child I love most. The woman I am now doesn't beg for space in anyone's life. She builds the space she needs and fills it with quiet power. Would I have done it differently if I could go back? Perhaps. Perhaps not. Because every tear, every silence, every humiliating moment led to something I never thought I'd see again. My son. Not the man he was shaped to be by someone else, but the boy I once raised in warmth and truth, returning to me, changed, chastened. But not broken. He still brings me groceries sometimes, even when I insist I don't need them. He still says thank you before leaving, even if it's just for the soup. And sometimes, late in the evening, we sit on the porch, watching the garden sway in the wind, and he says, "I'm trying, Mom." And I always reply, "I know." Because he is. David would be proud of him, not because he became a doctor or filed the right paperwork, but because he found his way back to truth, even when it hurt. And me? I've let go of needing to be the center of his world. I only ever wanted to be its compass. He is learning now, not just how to be a man, but how to be a son again. There's dignity in that. There's grace in watching your child choose you twice, once by birth and again by humility. I no longer worry about the trust account, because I've come to see that the greatest investment I ever made wasn't financial. It was emotional. And, though it took time to mature, it paid me back in the only currency that ever mattered: love freely returned. So I close this chapter not with vengeance, not with regret, but with a quiet kind of peace. Leah may be gone. The wedding may be a wound that never fully fades, but what remains is something stronger than betrayal: forgiveness, accountability, and the gentle repair of something once thought lost. To anyone listening who's been cut out, shut out, or silenced by those you once held up with your bare hands, know this: you are not unlovable, you are not invisible. And you do not have to shrink to be worthy of space in someone's life. Sometimes the strongest thing you'll ever do is nothing at all, not yelling, not chasing, just stepping back and letting the truth do what it was always meant to. Rise. In the end, I didn't undo what I did. I just gave him the space to understand why I did it, and the grace to come home anyway.